This is the Russian frigate, the Admiral Grigorovich, which fired warning shots when approached by a British yacht in the English Channel just before midday. The Grigorovich, seen here being visited by Vladimir Putin last year, has reportedly been escorting Russian Shadow Fleet vessels and was being closely monitored by the Royal Navy. The yacht's owners, Jane and Alan Kelvey, later told the paper that the incident was a bit scary and totally unnecessary. I understand the Russian vessel may itself have been drifting at the time of the incident and tried other methods to attract the attention of the yacht before resorting to warning shots, but it does come at a time of heightened tensions in the English Channel. In the early hours of Sunday, Royal Marine Commandos boarded and took control of an alleged Shadow Fleet tanker in the Channel. The tanker's Indian captain appeared in court today, charged with supplying sanctioned oil. An MOD spokesperson said they assessed today's warning shots to be an isolated incident, not related to the seizure of the tanker. But this reminder of Russian operations comes in the midst of a row here over defence spending. John Healey, speaking for the first time about his decision to quit, says there is simply not enough on offer in the new defence investment plan.
At this dangerous time, I see the current defence investment plans falling well short of what is required. We must not fall behind. When NATO needs European nations to step up, we must not fall short. Our adversaries don't follow timetables set by the Treasury.
And the Chief of the Defence Staff said that without more day-to-day money, the forces would have to start doing less.
We will have to dial back our activities and our exercise and operational activity if the level of resource funding that is available to us does not increase. Now, that is still to be debated and decided.
But at the G7 in France, the Prime Minister indicated there would be no new money for Healey's replacement, Dan Jarvis.
Obviously, the new Defence Secretary is reading in, and we're talking to him about how and what we will spend that money on in terms of the capability. And he's got his own thoughts now about what the priorities should be.
There was a time when Vladimir Putin attended these meetings. Now it is the Ukrainian president who comes, and the shadow of Russian aggression which darkens the agenda. Carl Dinn, News at 10, Westminster.
Well, the Grigorovich is no stranger to waters around Britain. So was today's incident just a one-off or part of a pattern? Geraint is here to explain.
Tom, this latest flashpoint between Russia and the UK took place outside UK territorial waters, 20 miles or so to the south of the Isle of Wight. The English Channel is an international maritime highway, and the Russian frigate involved has been operating along it, escorting shipments of sanctioned Russian oil. Now, the shots that were fired today were meant to be seen and heard, but there's clear evidence of covert Russian military activity in the seas that surround the UK. Earlier this year, the Ministry of Defence went public about its operation in the North Sea to stop Russian spy submarines from gathering information there about the network of cables and pipelines on which Britain is dependent for energy and data. Beyond our shores, NATO's eastern flank is constantly being tested. RAF Typhoons were scrambled to deter Russian jets, which got too close to NATO airspace over the Black Sea in April. NATO aircraft were authorised to engage Russian drones, which did the same thing over Romania a few weeks ago. And last year, at least 3 Russian drones were shot down over Poland. British defence officials are said to be treating the shots fired in the Channel this morning as an isolated incident, but the use of live ammunition in such circumstances has raised eyebrows.
Now, it may be just a coincidence, but with the Russians, it's always, I think, worth thinking that there's some messaging behind the action. And I think the messaging here is really about the Russian Navy, and by extension, the Russian state, baring its teeth, if you like, in the Channel. Very gently, perhaps, but just really saying we are here and we are prepared to stand our ground when we need to.
The circumstances of this morning's incident may have been simply unfortunate, but by sea and by air, around Britain's borders, the Russian military is making its presence ever more keenly felt, and the question remains, is the UK doing enough and spending enough to counter that threat?
Geraint, thank you very much indeed. Well, today's incident in the Channel occurred as the Prime Minister was meeting other G7 leaders in southern France, as we saw earlier. Well, Robert is there. Robert, what do you make of this, frankly, I guess, rather bizarre episode?
Well, look, there are two things that I witnessed today that I thought sort of explain why there was so much anxiety when we first learned about these shots. One was listening to John Healey in the House of Commons explaining why he resigned as Defence Secretary, and what he pointed to was a NATO assessment that there was, in his view, a high risk that by the end of the decade, 29-30, Russia would attack other European countries, which he takes very seriously, and that is why he felt he had to resign, because to meet that threat, he thinks we should be, or the government should be, spending somewhere between 10 and 15 billion pounds more per year than the Prime Minister has been prepared to commit. And he said he had to go because he has to make a point that we're missing, in his view, a historic opportunity to shore up our defences. And then here, however, in Evian in France, where this meeting of the G7 leaders of the world's richest democracies are meeting, what we saw was a tremendously affectionate bear hug between Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, and our own Prime Minister. And even though Healey believes the Prime Minister isn't spending enough, it is certainly the case that the Prime Minister passionately believes in defending Ukraine. And I think actually in some ways the most significant thing that's happened so far in this meeting is there are signs that finally President Trump is coming round to the view of the leaders, particularly in Europe, and particularly Macron and Starmer, and is now prepared to put more pressure on Putin, and actually also accepts that Ukraine may be close to putting enough of a squeeze on Russia to see an end to this conflict, well, sooner than we might have expected.